The dust settled around Georgia Preston's worn boots as she stood at the edge of the cemetery, staring at 3 fresh graves that held everything she had ever loved. And the preacher's words about hope and heaven felt like lies wrapped in velvet. It was June of 1878, and the Montana sun beat down mercilessly on Unionville, a small town nestled in the valley where the mountains met endless prairie. Georgia was 22 years old, though she felt ancient as she watched the last mourners drift away from where her parents and younger brother lay beneath the earth. A fever had swept through their homestead like wildfire, taking them all within a week while she had been away working as a seamstress in town. She had returned to find them already buried, the neighbors whispering apologies and avoiding her hollow eyes. Now she stood alone, her black dress borrowed from the minister's wife, her hands empty of everything except the deed to a failing ranch she had no idea how to run. The banknote was due in 3 months. Without her father's strong back and her brother's endless energy, the cattle would scatter, the fences would fall, and the land would be taken by men in suits who saw opportunity in other people's grief. "You should eat something, Miss Preston," old Mrs. Henderson said, touching her elbow gently. "There's food at the church." "Thank you, but no," Georgia replied, her voice distant and flat. She pulled away and began walking, not toward town but toward the open road that led out of Unionville. She did not know where she was going. She only knew she could not go back to that empty house, where her mother's apron still hung by the stove, and her father's pipe sat on the windowsill. The afternoon stretched long and hot as she walked, her boots raising small clouds with each step. She passed the general store, the saloon with its tinny piano music bleeding into the street, the blacksmith shop where the clang of hammer on anvil rang out in steady rhythm. She kept walking until the buildings thinned and disappeared, until there was nothing but the road and the grass and the mountains standing purple in the distance. She had no plan, no dreams. Dreams were for people who had not watched everything they loved turn to dust. Dreams were for fools who believed the world was kind. The sound of hoofbeats made her turn. A rider approached from behind, moving at an easy canter that suggested no particular hurry. As he drew closer, Georgia saw he was young, maybe 25 or 26, with dark hair that curled at his collar beneath a well-worn hat. He sat his horse like he had been born in the saddle, and there was something in the relaxed set of his shoulders that spoke of confidence without arrogance. "Afternoon, miss," he said, slowing his horse to match her walking pace. "Long way to be traveling on foot in this heat." "I am not traveling anywhere," Georgia said. "Just walking. Walking to nowhere, then." He studied her with eyes that were an unusual shade of green, like new grass after rain. "That is a lonely sort of destination. Perhaps I prefer lonely." He was quiet for a moment, his horse snorting and tossing its head. "I saw you at the cemetery. I am sorry for your loss." Georgia stopped walking and turned to face him fully. "Who are you?" "Nathan Hewitt," he said, touching the brim of his hat. "I just hired on at the Double R Ranch, a few miles north of here. Got into town this morning just in time to see half the population heading to a funeral." He paused. "Seems like you knew the deceased pretty well." "They were my family." The words came out harder than she intended. Nathan's expression shifted, something like understanding passing across his features. He dismounted in one fluid motion, leading his horse by the reins as he walked beside her. "Then I am truly sorry. There is nothing easy about losing the people you love. You sound like you know something about it." "My parents died when I was 16. Cholera down in Kansas. Left me and my 2 sisters to fend for ourselves." He glanced at her. "That was 10 years ago. The hurt does not go away, but it changes shape. Becomes something you can carry instead of something that crushes you." Georgia wanted to tell him he was wrong, that nothing could make this bearable, but she found she could not speak past the sudden tightness in her throat. They walked in silence for a while, her steps aimless and his patient. "Where were you planning to go?" Nathan asked finally. "I told you. Nowhere." "Well, nowhere is a fair distance off," he said lightly. "Might want to turn back before you get too far. Sun will be setting in a few hours and this road gets mighty dark." "I do not care about the dark." Nathan stopped walking. "Listen, Miss Preston, how do you know my name? Small town. People talk." He shifted the reins to his other hand. "Miss Preston, I do not know what you are feeling right now, and I would not presume to. But I know what it is like to want to walk away from everything. And I know that sometimes, when the grief is fresh and raw, people make decisions they cannot take back." Georgia turned on him, anger flaring hot in her chest. "What exactly are you suggesting?" "Nothing, just that you should not be alone right now." His voice was gentle but firm. "Let me walk you back to town, or to your ranch, wherever you are staying." "The ranch is not mine much longer." "The bank will take it. Then we will walk back to town." "I said I prefer lonely. And I am saying that what we prefer and what we need are not always the same thing." Nathan met her eyes steadily. "Please, let me at least see you somewhere safe." There was something in his face, some quality of genuine concern that broke through the numbness wrapping around Georgia's heart. She was so tired. Tired of walking, tired of thinking, tired of the weight pressing down on her shoulders. "Fine," she said quietly. "Town, then." They turned back, the sun beginning its slow descent toward the mountain peaks. Nathan kept his horse between Georgia and the road, a subtle shield against any passing traffic. They did not speak much, but his presence was somehow comforting, a solid reality in a world that had become unmoored. When they reached the edge of Unionville, Georgia stopped. "I do not have anywhere to stay in town. The ranch house is 3 miles east. You have a horse, in the stable behind the church, a mare. Then let us get her, and I will ride with you to make sure you get home safe." Georgia wanted to argue, to insist she did not need help, but the truth was she could barely keep herself upright. The day's grief had exhausted her in ways she had not imagined possible. So she simply nodded and let Nathan lead her to the church stable. Her mare, a gentle sorrel named Penny, nickered softly when Georgia approached. She saddled the horse with practiced motions, her hands remembering the routine even as her mind felt foggy and distant. Nathan watched but did not offer to help, seeming to understand that she needed to do this herself. The ride to the ranch was quiet, the evening air cooling as shadows stretched long across the prairie. When the house came into view, small and weathered against the darkening sky, Georgia felt her throat tighten again. The windows were dark. No smoke rose from the chimney. The place looked abandoned, haunted by absence. "Thank you for accompanying me," she said as they reached the front porch. "You can go now." Nathan dismounted and tied his horse to the rail. "When did you last eat?" "I do not remember." "Then I am making you something before I leave." He said it in a tone that brooked no argument, and Georgia found she did not have the energy to fight him. Inside, Nathan moved around the kitchen with surprising competence, lighting the stove and finding bread and butter and eggs. He did not ask where things were, just opened cabinets and drawers until he located what he needed. Georgia sat at the table and watched him, feeling strange and detached, as if this were happening to someone else. "Here," he said, setting a plate in front of her. Scrambled eggs and buttered bread, simple and warm. "Eat." She picked up the fork and took a small bite, then another. Hunger returned in a rush, and she found herself eating quickly, the food settling into her empty stomach and making her feel slightly more human. Nathan poured water from the pitcher on the counter and set a glass beside her plate. "Better, a little, thank you." He nodded and began cleaning the pan, his movements efficient. "Do you have family elsewhere? Anyone who could come help you with the ranch?" "No. My father's brother died in the war. My mother was an only child. There is just me." "What about the ranch hands? Surely your father had men working the land." "Two. They left the day after." She trailed off. "They said they could not work without wages, and I have no money to pay them. The cattle need to be rounded up and sold, but I do not know how to do it myself. Even if I did, it would not be enough to pay the bank." Nathan dried his hands on a towel and leaned against the counter. "How much do you owe?" $800. He whistled low. "That is a considerable sum. My father borrowed against the land to buy more cattle 2 years ago. The herd was supposed to pay for itself, but the winter was hard. We lost nearly half." Georgia set down her fork. "It does not matter. I cannot run a ranch alone. The bank can have it." "And then what? Where will you go?" "I do not know. I will find work somewhere, maybe go back to sewing." Nathan was quiet for a long moment, studying her with those green eyes. "You ever think about fighting for it? Fighting? Against the bank? Against fate?" Georgia shook her head. "What would be the point?" "The point would be keeping what your family built, honoring their work. I cannot do it alone. So do not do it alone." Nathan pulled out a chair and sat across from her. "I am a decent ranch hand, good with cattle, better with horses. I know how to mend fences and break ground and do just about everything that needs doing on a spread like this. And I just hired on at the Double R for $30 a month, which is not bad wages but not great either." Georgia frowned, not understanding where he was going with this. "What if," Nathan continued, "you hired me instead? I would work for a percentage of the sale when we get the cattle to market. If we make enough to pay the bank and have something left over, we split it. If we do not, well, then at least we tried." "Why would you do that? You do not even know me." "Maybe not. But I know what it is like to lose everything and have strangers look right through you like you are already gone. I know what it is like to need help and not know how to ask for it." He leaned forward, his expression earnest. "And I know good land when I see it. This place has potential. Your father knew what he was doing building here. It just needs someone to fight for it." Georgia felt something flicker in her chest, fragile and unfamiliar. It took her a moment to recognize it as hope, and the feeling scared her. Hope was dangerous. Hope could hurt worse than anything else. "I gave up on dreams," she said quietly. "After today, after everything, I gave up." Nathan held her gaze, and his voice when he spoke was soft but certain. "Then let me dream big enough for both of us." The words hung in the air between them, and Georgia felt tears slip down her cheeks before she could stop them. She had been holding everything in all day, staying numb and frozen, but something in his simple offer broke through the wall she had built. He was a stranger, and yet he was offering her something no one else had, belief that she could survive this, that the future was not already written in loss and failure. "I do not understand why you would risk this," she whispered. "Maybe I do not fully understand it myself," Nathan admitted. "But I learned a long time ago to trust my gut, and my gut says you are someone worth helping. This place is worth saving." He paused. "What do you say? Will you let me help?" Georgia wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Every reasonable part of her said this was foolish, that she should cut her losses and move on. But beneath the grief and exhaustion, something stubborn stirred. Her father had loved this land. Her mother had made this house a home. Her brother had ridden these fences and laughed in these fields. Maybe she owed it to them to try. "Yes," she said. "Yes, all right, but I need you to understand that I have no money to pay you if this fails. Then we will have to make sure it does not fail." Nathan extended his hand across the table. "Partners." Georgia looked at his hand for a long moment, then reached out and clasped it. His palm was calloused and warm, his grip firm and steady. "Partners." They shook on it, and Georgia felt the first fragile stirring of something she thought had died with her family. Not hope exactly, not yet. But possibility. The sense that maybe tomorrow did not have to be empty. Nathan stood and moved toward the door. I will ride back to the Double R tonight and tell them I found other work. Then I will be back at first light, and we will start taking stock of what needs to be done. You can stay here, Georgia heard herself say. There is a bunkhouse out back. No sense riding all that way in the dark just to turn around and come back. Nathan considered this, then nodded. Appreciated. I will get my gear settled then. You should get some rest. Tomorrow is going to be a long day. After he left, Georgia sat alone in the kitchen, listening to the old house creak and settle around her. For the first time since she had returned to find her family gone, she did not feel quite so alone. It was a small thing, fragile as spider silk, but she held onto it as she climbed the stairs to her room and fell into an exhausted sleep. She dreamed of mountains and wide skies, of cattle moving like a living river across the grass. And in her dream, she was not alone. Someone rode beside her, steady and sure, helping her drive the herd toward home. Morning came cool and clear, the sun painting the mountains gold as it climbed above the horizon. Georgia woke to the sound of someone moving around outside, and for one disoriented moment, she thought her father was up doing chores. Then memory crashed back, and the grief was fresh and sharp all over again. She dressed quickly in her oldest clothes, a split skirt and plain blouse that she wore for riding, and braided her dark hair down her back. When she stepped outside, she found Nathan already at work in the corral, examining the 3 horses her father had kept for ranch work. "Morning," he called when he saw her. "You have a good string here. This bay gelding is solid as they come." Georgia walked over, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "That is Chester. He was my father's horse. He is well trained, responds to leg pressure real nice." Nathan patted the horse's neck. "We will need him and your mare for sure. The third one, that Pinto, is he broke to saddle, she. And yes, but she can be temperamental. We will work with her. We need as many horses as we can get if we are going to cover ground looking for cattle." Nathan turned to face her. "I took a look around the property this morning, just the near pastures. You have got maybe 30 head close to the house, but I would guess there are more scattered in the hills. My father thought we had about 200 altogether before the winter losses. So figure maybe 150 now if we are lucky. Some might have drifted onto neighboring land. Some might have gone wild in the high country." Nathan pulled a small notebook from his pocket and a pencil stub. "We need to find them, round them up, and get them ready to drive to market. There is a rail station in Helena that buys cattle. That is about 40 miles north. 40 miles with 100 cattle." Georgia felt doubt creeping in. "Just the 2 of us. It has been done with less. We will take it slow and steady, but first we need to find them and gather them here." Nathan scribbled something in his notebook. "We also need to check the fences, fix what is broken, make sure we have somewhere to hold them once we bring them in, and we need supplies, food for us, feed for the horses. I have some money left from my sewing work, maybe $30. That will help. We can get beans and flour and coffee. Catch fish from the creek for fresh meat. Keep it simple." He looked up from his notes. "You know how to use a rope? I can manage." "Good. How about shooting? My father taught me. I am not sharp like he was, but I can hit what I aim at mostly." "Then we are in better shape than I thought." Nathan smiled, and it transformed his face, made him look younger and less serious. "We can do this, Georgia. It will not be easy, but we can do it." Hearing him use her first name sent an odd flutter through her chest. She pushed the feeling aside and focused on the practical matters at hand. "Where do we start?" "We start by riding out and seeing what we are dealing with. Bring a rope and your rifle." We will cover the north pasture today, see how many head we can find." They saddled Chester and Penny, and Nathan gave Georgia a boost into the saddle before mounting his own horse. The morning air was crisp and clean, carrying the scent of sage and pine. As they rode away from the ranch house, Georgia felt a strange mixture of sorrow and anticipation. This land held so many memories, but now she was looking at it with new eyes, seeing it as something she had to fight for rather than something that simply belonged to her. The north pasture rolled away in gentle hills dotted with scrub brush and scattered stands of trees. Nathan rode with easy confidence, his eyes constantly scanning the landscape. Georgia followed, trying to see what he saw, to learn the patterns and signs that would tell them where the cattle had gone. "There," Nathan said after about 20 minutes, pointing to a depression where a small stream cut through the land. "See those tracks, fresh, maybe from this morning. We have got cattle using this water source." They followed the stream uphill, and soon Georgia spotted movement in a copse of trees. A dozen cattle grazed there, their red and white coats dappled with shadow. The animals looked up as the riders approached, wary but not spooked. "Nice and easy," Nathan murmured. "Just get them moving downhill back toward the ranch. They will follow each other once we get them started." Working together, they edged the cattle out of the trees and started them moving in the right direction. It was slow work, requiring patience and constant attention. One stubborn cow kept trying to break away, and Georgia had to chase her back 3 times before the animal finally joined the group. By midday, they had found 30 more head and were driving them steadily toward the ranch. Nathan rode ahead to open the gate into the holding pasture near the barn, and Georgia brought up the rear, keeping the stragglers moving. When the last cow passed through and Nathan swung the gate shut, she felt a surge of accomplishment. 60 head total now, Nathan said, making a note. Not bad for half a day's work. They ate a quick lunch of bread and cheese in the shade of the barn, then headed out again, this time toward the east. The afternoon was hotter, the sun beating down relentlessly, and Georgia felt sweat trickling down her back. But she kept riding, following Nathan's lead as they covered mile after mile of rough country. They found 20 more cattle scattered along a rocky ridge, and the work of gathering them was harder than the morning's effort. The animals were skittish, unused to seeing people, and they kept trying to bolt up the slope into terrain too rough for horses to follow. "Circle around," Nathan called. "Get above them and push them down toward me." Georgia urged Penny uphill, her heart pounding as the mare scrambled over loose rock. When she reached a point above the cattle, she began yelling and waving her hat, driving them down the slope. The animals ran, hooves clattering on stone, and Nathan was there to turn them, directing them back toward lower ground. One young steer tried to break away, charging past Nathan's horse with its head down. Without thinking, Georgia spurred Penny forward and cut the animal off, turning it back toward the herd. Nathan whooped in approval, and despite her exhaustion, Georgia felt herself grin. They drove the new cattle back to join the others as the sun sank low on the horizon. When they reached the ranch, Georgia slid from her saddle with legs that trembled from fatigue. Every muscle ached and she was covered in dust and sweat. "You did good today," Nathan said, unsaddling Chester. "Real good. We found 80 head, and that is more than I hoped for the first day." "How many more do you think are out there?" "Hard to say. Could be 60, could be 100. We will keep looking. Tomorrow we will try the South Range." Nathan carried his saddle into the barn, and Georgia followed with her own gear. "You should go clean up and rest." "I will feed the horses and check the fences near the barn." Georgia wanted to argue that she should help, but the truth was she could barely stand. "Wake me if you need anything." "I will be fine. Go on." She stumbled to the house and pumped cold water from the well, washing the worst of the dust from her face and hands. Inside, she heated more water for a quick bath, then dressed in a clean nightgown and collapsed into bed. She thought she would lie awake, her mind spinning with worries, but exhaustion claimed her almost instantly. She woke once in the deep night and heard Nathan moving around in the bunkhouse, settling in for sleep. The sound was oddly comforting, a reminder that she was not alone in this. Then she drifted off again and did not wake until dawn light filtered through her curtains. The days fell into a pattern after that. Up before sunrise, a quick breakfast, then long hours in the saddle searching for cattle. They found them in twos and threes in groups of a dozen or more, scattered across the ranch's 4,000 acres. Some came easily, docile and used to being handled. Others were half wild, fighting every step of the way. Georgia learned quickly, absorbing everything Nathan taught her about reading the land, predicting where cattle would go, using pressure and release to move them without spooking them. Her body grew stronger, her hands surer. And slowly, the herd in the holding pasture grew. In the evenings, after the horses were tended and a simple supper eaten, they often sat on the porch in the cooling air and talked. Nathan told her about growing up in Kansas, about his sisters who had married and moved east, about the years he had spent drifting from ranch to ranch, never quite finding a place that felt like home. "What made you come to Montana?" Georgia asked one night, a week after they had started working together. "Heard the grass was good and the land was cheap. Thought maybe I could save enough to buy a small place of my own someday." Nathan leaned back in his chair, his feet propped on the porch rail. "Never expected to end up working a spread like this, but I am not complaining. It is good work, honest work." "Do you miss Kansas?" "Sometimes. I miss my sisters, the way things were before our parents died, but you cannot go back to how things were. You can only move forward." He glanced at her. "What about you? Did you ever think about leaving Unionville? When I was younger, I used to dream about going to San Francisco or Denver, seeing the cities. But that was before," she trailed off, "before you lost your family." "Yes." Georgia drew her knees up and wrapped her arms around them. "Now I do not know what I want. Part of me thinks I should leave, start fresh somewhere nobody knows me, but another part feels like leaving would be abandoning them somehow." "They are not here, Georgia. They are gone." Nathan's voice was gentle. "Staying or leaving would not change that. What matters is what you want for yourself." "I do not know what I want. I gave up on dreams, remember? You said that. And I said I would dream big enough for both of us." Nathan turned to look at her directly. "But the truth is, you have been dreaming all along. Every time you get in the saddle and ride out to find those cattle, every time you push yourself past tired into exhausted because you will not quit, you are dreaming. You are dreaming of saving this place, of keeping what your family built. That is a dream worth having." Georgia felt her eyes sting with sudden tears. "What if we fail? What if we do all this and it is not enough? Then at least we tried, and trying matters." Nathan reached over and squeezed her shoulder briefly before pulling back. "But I do not think we are going to fail. We have got 130 cattle now. That is more than enough to pay the bank if we get a decent price. We just have to keep going." "Keep going," Georgia repeated softly. It sounded so simple when he said it like that. Just keep going, one day at a time, one moment at a time. By the end of the second week, they had found and gathered 160 head, and Nathan decided it was time to start repairing fences in earnest. They spent 3 long days riding the property lines, hammering new posts into the sun-baked ground, stretching wire until George's hands were blistered and raw. It was hard, miserable work, but there was a satisfaction in it too. Each repaired section felt like a small victory, a piece of the ranch reclaimed from chaos and neglect. And working side by side with Nathan, she began to notice things she had not let herself see before. The way his shirt pulled tight across his shoulders when he lifted the post-hole digger. The concentration on his face when he was working through a problem. The patience in his voice when he explained something to her for the third time. The laugh lines around his eyes when something struck him as funny. She told herself it meant nothing, that she was simply grateful for his help and company. But late at night, lying alone in her bed, she found herself thinking about him in ways that had nothing to do with gratitude. She wondered what it would be like to fall asleep beside him, to wake with his arm around her. She wondered what his lips would taste like, what his hands would feel like on her skin. The thoughts both thrilled and frightened her. It had been less than a month since she had lost her family. How could she be thinking about Nathan this way? What kind of person felt desire and hope so soon after grief? But the feelings would not be denied. They grew stronger each day, fed by every shared glance and accidental touch, every quiet conversation in the evening light. She did not know if Nathan felt anything similar. He was always kind and respectful, never crossing any lines. Sometimes she caught him watching her with an expression she could not quite read, but he always looked away before she could be certain what she had seen. 3 weeks into their partnership, they finished the fencing and turned their attention to preparing for the drive to Helena. Nathan rode into Unionville to arrange for supplies and to get information about the cattle market, while Georgia stayed at the ranch to work with the more difficult horses. He returned in late afternoon with his saddlebags full of beans and flour and coffee, and news that made Georgia's heart sink. The cattle buyer in Helena is only paying $15 a head right now, Nathan said grimly. Prices are down because there has been a glut of beef coming in from Wyoming. At $15, we would make $2,400 total. After expenses for the drive and supplies, we would have maybe $2,200 left. Enough to pay the bank and have something to live on, but not by much. Georgia did the math in her head. That is $1,400 left after the bank note. Split between us, that is $700 each. Not exactly a fortune. No, but it is enough for a fresh start if you want it. You could take your share and go anywhere you like, set yourself up in a new place. Something in his tone made her look at him sharply. And what about you? I would probably move on, look for another ranch job. He would not meet her eyes. That was the deal. We work together, get the cattle sold, split the profit. Right, the deal. Georgia felt an unexpected hollowness in her chest. In all their planning and working, she had not let herself think about what would happen after. About the fact that once the cattle were sold and the bank paid, there would be no reason for Nathan to stay. He would move on to the next job, the next opportunity, and she would be alone again. Except she did not want to be alone. Not anymore. Somewhere in the past 3 weeks, Nathan had become more than a business partner. He had become a friend. And if she was honest with herself, he had become something more than that too. We should plan to leave in 3 days, Nathan said, breaking into her thoughts. That gives us time to prepare the cattle and pack our gear. The drive should take about 5 days if the weather holds and we do not have trouble. All right, 3 days. Georgia forced herself to focus on the practical matters. What do we need to do to get ready? They spent the next days in a flurry of activity. They sorted through the herd, separating out the calves too young to make the drive and the few animals too sick or weak to travel. They mended saddles and checked their camping gear, packed food and blankets and rope. Nathan shod the horses, and Georgia sewed repairs into clothing torn by 3 weeks of hard work. On the evening before they were set to leave, Georgia stood in her parents' bedroom, looking at the few possessions they had left behind. Her mother's wedding ring in a small wooden box. her father's rifle mounted above the mantel, her brother's collection of interesting rocks lined up on a shelf, each one labeled in his careful handwriting. She had been avoiding this room, unable to face the memories. But now, on the verge of leaving the ranch for the first time since the funeral, she needed to be here one last time. "I am trying," she whispered to the empty room. "I am trying to save it like you would have wanted. I hope that is enough." A soft knock on the doorframe made her turn. Nathan stood there, his hat in his hands. "Sorry to disturb you, just wanted to make sure you were all right." "I am saying goodbye," Georgia said, "in case we do not come back." "We are coming back," Nathan said firmly. "We will drive those cattle to Helena, get our money, pay the bank, and come right back here." "And then what?" The question hung between them. Nathan stepped into the room, his expression serious. "What do you want, Georgia? Truly, I want." She stopped, afraid to say it out loud. Afraid of being vulnerable, of admitting what she had started to feel. But the time for hiding was past. "I do not want to lose this place, and I do not want to lose you." Nathan went very still. "Lose me? You said once we sell the cattle, we go our separate ways. That was the deal." Georgia forced herself to keep talking, even though her heart was pounding. "But I have been thinking, and I do not want that. I want you to stay. Georgia, the ranch needs a foreman, someone who knows cattle and horses and how to run a spread like this. Someone who cares about the land the way my father did." She took a breath. "I am offering you that job, a quarter share of the ranch and a real wage once we are profitable, a partnership, but a permanent one this time." Nathan moved closer, and she could see emotions moving across his face, too quick to identify. "Why are you offering me this?" "Because you have worked harder for this place than you had any reason to. Because you believed in it when I could not believe in anything. Because you are a good man and I trust you." She paused. "And because I do not want you to leave." "Is that the only reason?" His voice had gone soft and tense. "The only reason you want me to stay?" Georgia's breath caught. They were standing very close now, close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his green eyes, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from his skin. This was the moment. She could pull back, keep it safe and professional, or she could take the risk. "No," she whispered. "That is not the only reason." Nathan lifted his hand slowly, giving her time to move away. When she stayed still, he cupped her cheek gently, his thumb brushing along her cheekbone. "I need you to be sure about this. I need you to be sure about what you are saying. I am sure that I feel something for you that I did not expect to feel. I am sure that the thought of you leaving makes me ache. I am sure that when I think about the future, I see you in it." Her voice trembled. "I am not saying I have everything figured out. I am not saying it is not complicated. But I am sure that I want a chance to find out what this could be. Georgia." Her name was barely a breath on his lips. Then he was kissing her, and she was kissing him back, her arms coming up around his neck. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, as if they were both afraid of breaking something fragile. But then it deepened, became something more urgent and real. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Nathan rested his forehead against hers. "I have wanted to do that for 2 weeks," he admitted. "Maybe longer, but I did not think you felt the same way. I did not think it was my place so soon after your loss." "My family would have liked you," Georgia said. "My father would have respected how hard you work. My mother would have thought you were handsome. And my brother would have followed you around asking a million questions about horses and cattle and everything else." Nathan laughed softly, and the sound made her smile. "I wish I could have known them. They are gone, and that hurts in ways I cannot even describe. But you are here. And maybe that is what they would have wanted for me. Someone who helps me keep living instead of just surviving." They kissed again, slower this time, savoring it. When they finally separated, Nathan kept his arms around her waist, holding her close. about your offer," he said. "I accept all of it. The foreman job, the partnership, the chance to see what this could become." He smiled. "But you should know I was going to stay anyway. I could not have left you, not now. Not ever, if I am being honest." Georgia felt something warm and bright bloom in her chest. It was hope, real and strong, the kind that could survive disappointment and loss because it was rooted in something solid. "So we are doing this. Together." "Together," Nathan agreed. "We will drive the cattle, pay the bank, and then we will figure out how to make this ranch thrive. And in whatever time is left over, we will figure out us." I like the sound of that. They stood there in her parents' room, holding each other as the light faded outside the windows. Georgia thought about what Nathan had said weeks ago, about dreaming big enough for both of them. But now she realized they were both dreaming. Dreaming of a future built on hard work and trust, on partnership, and something that might grow into love if they gave it the chance. The next morning, they set out with the cattle, driving them north toward Helena and the rail station. It was grueling work, keeping 150 animals moving in roughly the same direction, but they had developed a rhythm over the past weeks. Nathan rode ahead, scouting the trail and finding good places to stop for water. Georgia brought up the rear, keeping the stragglers moving and watching for any animal that tried to break away. They made about 8 miles the first day, which Nathan said was decent progress. They camped that night beside a creek, the cattle settled and quiet, the horses picketed nearby. Nathan built a small fire and made coffee while Georgia heated beans and fried bacon in a pan. They ate sitting close together, their shoulders touching. The night was full of stars, the air carrying the smell of sage and wood smoke. After they finished eating, Nathan pulled Georgia against his side, his arm around her shoulders, and they sat in comfortable silence watching the flames dance. "Tell me something you have never told anyone else," Georgia said after a while. Nathan thought for a moment. "When my parents died and I had to take care of my sisters, I was terrified. I was barely more than a kid myself, and suddenly I was responsible for keeping us all alive. There were nights I would lie awake and panic, certain I was going to fail them. But you did not fail them. They are alive and married and happy," you said. "They are. But I did not know that was how it would turn out. At the time, every day felt like I was barely keeping our heads above water." He paused. "I guess what I am saying is, I understand what you are feeling. The fear that you are going to fail, that you are not strong enough or smart enough to handle what life has given you. But you are stronger than you think. You have proven that already." Georgia leaned her head against his shoulder. "Your turn. Ask me something." "All right." "What are you most afraid of?" The question hit deeper than she expected. Georgia considered lying, deflecting, but she had promised herself she would be honest with him. "I am afraid of losing someone I love again. I am afraid of letting myself care about you and then having you taken away somehow. I am afraid that the universe will decide I have had enough happiness and take it from me again." Nathan was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was gentle. "I cannot promise that nothing bad will ever happen. Life does not work that way. But I can promise that I am not going anywhere by choice. I am here and I plan to stay here as long as you will have me. Forever then. Forever sounds about right." He tilted her face up and kissed her softly. "We should get some sleep. Long day tomorrow." They banked the fire and settled into their bedrolls, laid out on opposite sides of the dying flames. But after a few minutes, Nathan spoke into the darkness. "Georgia, if you are cold, you could move your bedroll over here. Body heat, you know. Practical." She smiled even though he could not see it. Practical. Right. But she gathered her blankets and moved to his side of the fire, spreading her bedroll next to his. They lay side by side, not quite touching at first. Then Nathan reached over and took her hand, lacing his fingers through hers. "Good night," he said. "Good night." Georgia fell asleep holding his hand, the stars wheeling overhead and the cattle lowing softly in the darkness. She dreamed of green grass and running water, of a house with light in the windows and laughter echoing from the porch. The next 4 days passed in a blur of dust and heat and endless riding. They pushed the cattle steadily north, covering 10 to 12 miles each day. The animals grew tired but stayed together, and they lost only 2 steers to injury along the way. Nathan was patient and capable, handling problems as they arose without complaint. When a section of the herd tried to bolt during a thunderstorm, he rode after them without hesitation, turning them back to the main group. When Georgia's horse threw a shoe, he dismounted and fixed it himself using tools from his saddle bag. And every evening, they made camp and ate together and talked as the sun set. Georgia learned that Nathan had once wanted to be a school teacher before his parents died, that he loved books and poetry, though he had not had much chance to read in recent years. Nathan learned that Georgia had wanted to learn the piano, that her favorite color was the blue of the Montana sky just before dawn, that she had a stubborn streak a mile wide when something mattered to her. They kissed goodnight each evening, the kisses growing longer and deeper as the days passed. Georgia felt herself falling for him in ways that were both terrifying and exhilarating. This was not a girlish infatuation. This was real and solid, built on shared work and respect and genuine affection. On the 5th day, they reached Helena. The town was bigger than Unionville, bustling with miners and railroad workers and all manner of people passing through. Nathan left Georgia with the cattle on the outskirts while he rode in to find the buyer and make arrangements. He returned an hour later with a middle-aged man in a suit who introduced himself as Mr. Carver, the regional cattle buyer for the railroad. "Fine-looking animals," Mr. Carver said, walking among the herd with a critical eye. "Healthy, good weight. I will give you 15 a head, cash on the spot." Nathan looked at Georgia and she nodded. They had discussed this and agreed it was a fair price given the current market. "Deal," Nathan said, and they shook on it. The actual sale took most of the afternoon. The cattle were driven to holding pens near the rail station, counted and inspected. Then Mr. Carver counted out $2,250 in paper currency and gold coins. Nathan divided it carefully, putting half in his saddlebag and half in George's. "Pleasure doing business with you," Mr. Carver said. "If you have more cattle to sell next year, come find me." "We will," Georgia said, and realized she meant it. She was already thinking ahead to next year, to rebuilding the herd and doing this again. The ranch was not just something to save anymore. It was something to build, to grow. They stayed in Helena that night, renting a room at a modest hotel. Nathan insisted on getting 2 rooms, but Georgia said one was fine as long as it had 2 beds. The proprietor gave them a knowing look, but took their money without comment. Upstairs, Georgia counted out $800 and put it in a bank envelope. The rest she tucked into her bag, along with the deed to the ranch. In the morning, they would start the long ride home, and then she would pay the bank and secure the future of the land her family had built. Nathan sat on his bed, cleaning trail dust from his saddle. Georgia watched him work, his hands sure and practiced, and felt a wave of emotion so strong it made her throat tight. "Thank you," she said quietly. He looked up. "For what?" "For everything. For believing in me when I did not believe in myself. For working so hard. For staying." Nathan set aside the saddle and crossed to where she sat on the other bed. He knelt in front of her and took her hands in his. "I did not do this just to be kind, Georgia. I did it because from the moment I saw you walking down that road looking lost and broken, I could not get you out of my head. I did it because you are brave and strong and beautiful, and I wanted to be the person who helped you remember how to dream." "I am dreaming now," she said softly. "I am dreaming of the ranch thriving, of rebuilding the herd and fixing up the house, of making something that would make my family proud." She paused. "And I am dreaming of you being there for all of it. I am not going anywhere." "Good." Georgia leaned forward and kissed him, and he kissed her back with a passion that made her heart race. His hands came up to cradle her face, gentle despite the calluses, and she felt safe and wanted and alive in ways she had not felt in so long. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Nathan rested his forehead against hers. "We should stop before I forget myself entirely and do something that would not be proper in a hotel room with thin walls." Georgia laughed, the sound surprising them both. "Probably wise, but someday soon I am not going to want to stop." "Someday soon," Nathan agreed, his voice rough. "But when that day comes, I want to do it right. I want you to be my wife, not just someone I share a bed with." Georgia's heart skipped. "Is that a proposal?" "Not yet. When I propose, you will know it. I will have a ring and the words all planned out." He smiled. "But I am saying my intentions are honorable. I want a future with you, Georgia, a real future. Marriage and partnership and everything that comes with it." "I want that too," she said, and knew it was true. A month ago, she had been ready to walk into the wilderness and disappear. Now she was planning a future, talking about marriage, building something new from the ashes of loss. It felt impossible and inevitable all at once. They slept in their separate beds that night, but when Georgia woke once in the darkness, frightened by a nightmare about losing the ranch, Nathan was there. He climbed into her bed and held her until she fell back asleep, his arms strong and safe around her. In the morning, they bought supplies for the journey home and set out at first light. The ride back was easier without the cattle, and they made good time, covering 20 miles the first day. On the second day, as they rode through familiar country, Nathan began talking about plans for the ranch. "We should think about diversifying. Cattle are good, but we could add some sheep, maybe some pigs, and we should plant a bigger garden enough to sell vegetables in town. Multiple income streams means we are not dependent on one thing going right." Georgia listened, her mind spinning with possibilities. "My mother used to make preserves and sell them to the general store. We could do that again. And there is good timber on the north section. We could sell logs for building." "Now you are thinking like a rancher." Nathan grinned at her. "We will make this place so profitable you will be able to hire proper ranch hands and take it easy." "I do not want to take it easy. I like working the land." "Then we will work it together." He reached over and squeezed her hand. "Together is how we will make this work." They reached Unionville on the afternoon of the third day, dusty and tired but triumphant. Georgia rode straight to the bank, the envelope of money in her saddlebag. Nathan waited outside, holding the horses, while she went in to settle her debt. Mr. Thornton, the bank manager, looked surprised to see her. "Miss Preston, I was not expecting you." "I have your $800, Georgia said, placing the envelope on his desk. "The ranch debt is paid in full." Mr. Thornton counted the money twice, his expression shifting from skepticism to grudging respect. "Well, I must admit, I did not think you would manage it. Congratulations." He pulled out a ledger and made a notation, then stamped the deed with a loud thunk that made Georgia jump. "The land is yours, free and clear." "Thank you." Georgia took the deed and walked out into the sunshine where Nathan waited. She held up the stamped document. "It is done. The ranch is ours." Nathan let out a whoop and swept her into his arms, spinning her around right there on Main Street. Georgia laughed, not caring who saw, feeling lighter than she had in months. They rode home in the golden light of late afternoon, and when the ranch house came into view, Georgia felt tears prick her eyes. It looked the same as when they had left, but everything was different. This was not just the place where she had grown up, the place where she had lost her family. This was home, and it was hers, and she had fought for it and won. Over the next weeks, they settled into a new rhythm. Nathan moved his things from the bunkhouse into the main house, taking the spare bedroom down the hall from Georgia's. They worked together, repairing the barn and clearing brush and making plans for the winter ahead. Georgia rode into town and bought chickens and 3 young pigs. Nathan bartered for sheep with a neighbor who was moving east. Slowly, the ranch began to feel alive again, full of purpose and possibility. And in the evenings, they sat together on the porch or in the parlor, talking about the day's work and the plans for tomorrow. Sometimes they read aloud to each other from the books Nathan had owned before his parents died, precious volumes he had carried with him from place to place. Sometimes they simply sat in comfortable silence, Georgia mending clothes while Nathan carved pieces of wood into useful things. The touches grew more frequent, more natural. A hand on the small of her back as he passed behind her chair, his arm around her shoulders as they stood watching the sunset, her head resting against his chest as they sat together on the sofa. They kissed often now, long, slow kisses that made Georgia's heart race and her body ache with wanting more. But Nathan kept his promise, never pushing beyond what was proper for an unmarried couple. It was frustrating and sweet all at once, this restraint that spoke of respect and genuine care. One evening in late August, nearly 2 months after they had met, Nathan disappeared after supper without explanation. Georgia cleaned up the dishes and waited, puzzled by his absence. He returned as the sun was setting, leading his horse. He tied the animal to the porch rail and climbed the steps to where Georgia stood waiting. "I have something for you," he said, and his nervousness was obvious. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. "This is not fancy. I could not afford anything grand. But it is real and it is honest, and I hope you will like it." Georgia opened the box with trembling hands. Inside was a simple gold band with a small blue stone set in the center. "Nathan, it is turquoise. I bought it from a jeweler in Helena while we were there, before I knew if you felt the same way about me. I just knew I wanted to have it in case." He took the ring from the box and held it up. "Georgia Preston, I love you. I love your strength and your courage and the way you laugh when something surprises you. I love working beside you and building this life with you. Will you marry me? Will you let me be your partner in all things for as long as we both live?" "Yes." The word came out choked with tears. "Yes, of course yes." Nathan slipped the ring onto her finger and it fit perfectly. Then he pulled her into his arms and kissed her with a passion that made her knees weak. "I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret this," he promised against her lips. "I could never regret you." Georgia kissed him again. Whenever you want. Tomorrow, next month, next year, I will wait as long as you need. I do not want to wait. I have already waited too long for something good." Georgia looked up at him, her hand with the ring pressing against his chest over his heart. "Let us get married as soon as possible. Let us start our life together. Next week, then, we will go to the church and make it official." They were married the following Saturday in the small white church in Unionville. The minister's wife and old Mrs. Henderson stood as witnesses, and a handful of townspeople came to watch. Georgia wore her mother's wedding dress, altered to fit, and carried a bouquet of wildflowers Nathan had picked that morning. Nathan wore his best shirt and pants, his hair neatly combed, his face serious with the weight of the vows he was taking. When the minister pronounced them man and wife, Nathan kissed Georgia with such tender joy that Mrs. Henderson wept into her handkerchief. They spent their wedding night at the ranch. in the main bedroom that had once belonged to Georgia's parents. Nathan carried her over the threshold, then set her down gently and cupped her face in his hands. "Are you sure about this?" he asked softly. "We can wait if you need more time." "I am sure." Georgia began unbuttoning his shirt with slightly shaking hands. "I am sure about you, about us, about everything." They made love slowly, learning each other's bodies with patience and care. Nathan was gentle and attentive, making sure Georgia felt safe and wanted. And when they finally came together, it felt like the most natural thing in the world, the final piece of the life they were building together. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the darkness, the windows open to let in the cool night air. Nathan traced idle patterns on Georgia's bare shoulder, and she felt completely at peace for the first time since before her family had died. "Tell me what you are thinking," Nathan said. "I am thinking about how different everything is from 3 months ago. How lost I felt, how certain I was that nothing good would ever happen again." Georgia turned to look at him in the moonlight. "And now here I am, married to a man I love, with a ranch that is ours and a future that feels full of possibility. It is almost too much to believe. Believe it. This is real. We are real." Nathan kissed her forehead. "And this is just the beginning. We have our whole lives ahead of us." "Our whole lives," Georgia repeated, and the words felt like a promise. They fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, and Georgia dreamed of children running through the ranch yard, of cattle grazing on green hills, of growing old beside the man who had taught her how to dream again. The first year of marriage was not easy, but it was good. They worked from dawn to dusk building up the ranch, expanding the herds and planting crops. Nathan proved to be everything Georgia had hoped he would be: a skilled rancher, a patient teacher, and a loving husband. They hired 2 ranch hands in the spring, young men from town who needed work. Nathan taught them the same way he had taught Georgia, with patience and clear instruction. By summer, the ranch was running smoothly, profitable enough that they could start saving money for the first time. Georgia discovered she was pregnant in October, and the joy on Nathan's face when she told him was worth all the fear and uncertainty she had felt before. He became even more protective, insisting she not lift heavy things or ride the wilder horses. She tolerated his fussing because she knew it came from love. Their son was born in May of 1879, during a thunderstorm that rattled the windows and made the house feel small and cozy. Nathan held Georgia's hand through the long hours of labor, and when the baby finally arrived, squalling and red-faced, he wept openly. "What should we name him?" Nathan asked, cradling the tiny bundle with a mixture of terror and wonder. Georgia thought of her father and brother, of the family she had lost, but this was not about the past. This was about the future. "Thomas," she said. "Thomas Nathan Hewitt, Thomas." Nathan touched the baby's small hand and tiny fingers curled around his thumb. "Welcome to the world, son. You are going to love it here." Over the next years, 2 more children joined them, a daughter named Sarah in 1881 and another son named James in 1883. The ranch house echoed with the sounds of children playing, and Georgia sometimes had to stop and marvel at how full her life had become. Nathan was a wonderful father, patient and playful. He taught Thomas to ride almost as soon as the boy could walk. He braided Sarah's hair and told her stories about brave cowgirls who saved the day. He carried James on his shoulders while doing chores, singing silly songs that made the toddler shriek with laughter. And at night, after the children were asleep, he would pull Georgia into his arms and tell her he loved her, that she was the best thing that had ever happened to him. She always said it back, meaning it more each time. The ranch thrived under their care. They expanded the cattle operation and added a successful horse breeding program. They built a new barn and hired more help. By 1885, they were one of the most prosperous ranches in the area, known for fair dealing and quality stock. Georgia sometimes thought about the girl she had been on that dusty road, so lost and hopeless she had wanted to disappear. That girl felt like a stranger now, someone from another lifetime. She had become someone new, a wife, a mother, a successful rancher. Someone who had learned that dreams were not foolish, that believing in the future was not a weakness but a strength. One evening in the summer of 1885, 7 years after they had met, Georgia and Nathan sat on the porch watching their children play in the yard. Thomas was 6 now, tall for his age and already showing his father's way with horses. Sarah was 4, spirited and fearless. James was 2, toddling after his older siblings and trying to keep up. "You remember what you said to me the day we met?" Georgia asked, leaning against Nathan's shoulder. "I said a lot of things that day. You said if I had given up on dreams, you would dream big enough for both of us." Nathan smiled. "I remember. Well, I want you to know something." Georgia turned to look at him directly. "You kept that promise. You dreamed big enough to save the ranch and build this life. But along the way, you taught me how to dream again too, and now I am dreaming even bigger things. I am dreaming about our children growing up strong and happy. I am dreaming about growing old with you, sitting on this porch when we are gray and wrinkled. I am dreaming about a future so bright it almost hurts to look at." Nathan cupped her face and kissed her softly. "Then let us keep dreaming together. Let us build something so big and beautiful it outlasts us both." "Deal," Georgia said and kissed him back. Thomas called out from the yard, asking his father to come see something. Nathan squeezed Georgia's hand and went to see what adventure his son had found. Georgia watched him go. This man who had appeared in her life when she needed him most. This partner who had become her whole world. The sun set slowly over the Montana mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink and deepest blue. The ranch was peaceful, full of life and love and promise. And Georgia sat on her porch, watching her family, and felt grateful for every moment that had brought her here. She had thought she was done with dreams, that grief had killed hope forever. But Nathan had shown her that dreams were stronger than loss, that love could grow even in the hardest soil. He had dreamed big enough for both of them until she could dream again herself. And now they were dreaming together, building a future one day at a time, one moment at a time. It was not always easy. There were hard days and setbacks and moments of doubt, but they faced it all together, partners in every sense of the word. As the stars began to appear overhead, Nathan returned to the porch and pulled Georgia to her feet. "Dance with me," he said, and began humming a waltz. They danced there in the twilight, the children watching and giggling, the world reduced to the space between heartbeats. And Georgia thought about how she had once been so broken she could not see past the next breath. Now she was looking at years and decades, at a lifetime of moments like this. "I love you," she whispered against Nathan's chest. "I love you too," he replied. "Always have, always will." The music continued, carrying them into the night. And in that moment, everything was perfect. Everything was right. They had built something worth having, worth fighting for. They had turned loss into hope and hope into reality. The ranch would continue to thrive under their care, growing and expanding over the decades. Thomas would take over the day-to-day operations eventually, running the place with his father's skill and his mother's determination. Sarah would marry a neighboring rancher and start her own successful spread. James would become a veterinarian, traveling between ranches and caring for the animals that were the lifeblood of Montana. And through it all, Georgia and Nathan would be there, the foundation upon which everything else was built. They would face droughts and hard winters, economic downturns, and personal challenges. But they would face it all together, their partnership as strong at 70 as it had been at 22 and 25. In their final years, they would sit on that same porch and watch their grandchildren play in the yard where their own children had played. They would hold hands and remember that dusty road where they had met, the unlikely beginning of a love story that had defined both their lives. Nathan would die first, in his sleep at age 83, his hand still holding Georgia's. She would mourn him deeply, the loss sharp even after so many years together. But she would not break the way she had broken at 22. Because he had taught her that love did not end with death, that the dreams they had built together would outlive them both. Georgia would live another 5 years, seeing Thomas's first grandchild born before she passed away peacefully in the house she and Nathan had filled with so much life. Her children would lay her to rest beside Nathan in the Unionville Cemetery, not far from where her parents and brother were buried. And the ranch would continue, generation after generation, a testament to what two people could build when they refused to give up on dreams. The land would remember them, the way land always remembers those who love it well, but that was all far in the future. For now, on this perfect summer evening in 1885, Georgia and Nathan simply danced on the porch while their children watched and laughed. They were young and strong and deeply in love, with their whole lives stretching ahead of them like the Montana sky, vast and beautiful and full of endless possibility. The stars wheeled overhead, ancient and constant. The mountains stood sentinel in the distance. And in a small ranch house in Unionville, a family made of loss and hope and stubborn dreams lived and loved and thrived. Georgia had once said she had given up on dreams. Nathan had whispered that he would dream big enough for both of them. But in the end, they had both dreamed together, and those dreams had become reality in ways neither could have imagined. It was not a perfect life. Perfect lives did not exist, but it was a good life, built on love and trust and the kind of partnership that made both of them stronger. It was exactly the life they had both needed, even when they had not known what to wish for. And as the night deepened and the children were called inside for bed, Georgia took one last look at the land stretching away into darkness. This was home. This was where she belonged. And beside her, his hand warm in hers, was the man who had helped her find her way back to living. "Ready for bed?" Nathan asked softly. "Ready," Georgia replied, and let him lead her inside toward rest and tomorrow and all the days after that. Toward the future they had built together, one dream at a time. The door closed behind them with a gentle click, and the ranch settled into peaceful quiet. In the barn, horses shifted in their stalls. In the pastures, cattle rested beneath the stars. And in the house, a family slept safe and warm, surrounded by love and possibility. The story of Georgia and Nathan was not about grand gestures or dramatic moments, though it had its share of both. It was about the quiet persistence of hope, the stubborn refusal to let grief have the final word. It was about finding love in unexpected places and building something lasting from broken pieces. It was about learning that dreams were not weakness but strength, not foolishness but courage. It was about believing that tomorrow could be better than today, and then working to make it so. And in the end, it was about two people who found each other when they both needed finding, who built a life together that honored both their pasts and their futures, who loved each other through good times and hard times with equal devotion. That was the story. That was the dream. And it was worth every moment it took to make it real.